I'm Sadie Bennett, 28, and I thought I'd claimed my freedom, building a quiet life in my Portland loft where rain taps the windows like a steady heartbeat. Then Mom called, her voice cutting sharp, ordering me to babysit Sophie, Liam, and Mia while the family escaped to a Bahamas cruise. "Family matters most," she snapped, reducing me to a convenience. I said never, and the fallout erupted. Claire's cold laughter, Dad's heavy guilt, and Sophie's quiet rebellion at 13, seeing what I'd missed for years. A widow's wisdom and a stranger's shared scars pulled me from the wreckage. I forged a renegade Christmas that broke their rules, discovering never wasn't my end, but my awakening. How did I turn their chains into my strength? Step into my story and find out. I perched on the edge of my chair in my Portland loft, cradling a mug of chamomile tea as rain tapped the windows with restless fingers. At 28, I'd carved this haven from nothing, a cocoon of warm lamplight and stillness, rested from years under my family's thumb. The city murmured beyond the glass, a distant lullaby to my hard-won peace. My phone jolted me upright, buzzing like an alarm on the table. Vivian's name glared from the screen, my mother's presence already coiling tight around me. I answered, and her voice sliced through, brisk and unyielding, announcing a Bahamas cruise for the family. Before I could process it, she landed her order. I'd stay behind to watch Sophie, Liam, and Mia, my sister's kids, 13, 6, and 9. My throat tightened, a cold fist squeezing. I asked why I wasn't invited, my words stumbling out, fragile against her steel. She didn't hesitate. "You've got no kids to fuss over, Sadie, so step up. Family's what counts, and you'd know that if you weren't so wrapped up in yourself." Her tone dripped with scorn, each syllable a pinprick tearing at my pride. A spark flared in my chest, hot and unfamiliar, urging me to bite back. I demanded to know why my time didn't matter while they sipped cocktails on a deck. She laughed, short and bitter, then turned the blade. "Selfish as always. Wait till your father hears this, he'll sort you out." The call cut off, leaving a hollow hum in my ear. I dropped the phone, my hands trembling, tea sloshing onto the table, cooling fast. The rain quickened, drumming a frantic beat against the panes, mirroring the pulse thudding in my temples. My loft, once a shield, felt like a cage closing in, its quiet mocked by her words. I'd fought for this life, paid every bill, claimed every inch of this space as proof I could stand alone. Yet she'd reached through the miles, her voice a leash yanking me back to that old, obedient girl. My breath hitched, anger tangling with a raw ache I couldn't name. I stared at the blurred lights beyond the window, the city shimmering through the downpour. Her scorn echoed, but something else stirred beneath it, a word I'd never dared speak, rising like a tide. It pressed against my ribs, sharp and alive, begging to be let loose. I didn't say it then, not yet, but as the rain lashed harder, I knew it wouldn't stay silent long. I lingered in my Portland loft, Mom's voice still a jagged echo scraping at my thoughts as I traced restless paths across the hardwood with my bare feet. Rain whispered against the windows, a delicate shiver of sound, yet my mind roiled like a storm-swelled river. I couldn't silence the past, those moments clawing their way up. Easter Sundays hunched over their sink while they toasted each other, late nights fetching groceries they'd forgotten, my silence a leash I'd worn too long. I paused by the window, fingers curling into my palms, nails biting skin, and wondered why I'd let them bind me with guilt. My phone glowed with Claire's name, my sister, a flicker of hope I seized too quickly. Her voice answered bright and careless, slicing through my plea with a laugh. "You're free, Sadie, what's the big deal?" She tossed out, her words a cold splash, eroding what little trust I'd held. I ended the call, my throat raw, her indifference a bruise blooming beneath my ribs. Then Greg's name flashed up, my father, his call a weight pressing down before he even spoke. His growl rolled through, rough as splintered wood. "Don't wreck Christmas for us," he said, and I saw him in his old chair, glaring at me across years, expecting me to shrink like I had when I'd scrubbed their floors last spring while he barked orders. A ember flared in my gut, fed by Claire's shrug and Mom's decree, growing into a blaze I couldn't douse. I clenched the phone, my voice steady as stone when I cut him off. "Never," I said, the word a spark igniting the air. "If this is family, I'm done with Christmas." He choked out a protest. "You don't mean that, girl." But I pressed end, his sputter fading into nothing. The phone slipped from my hand, landing with a soft clatter on the table, and my knees buckled, dropping me onto the couch. My heart raced, a frantic drum against my chest, but the rain's murmur wove through it, calming the tempest inside. I leaned back, the cushions cradling me, their worn fabric a quiet testament to nights I'd claimed for myself. The loft stretched wide around me, its shadows gentle now, a space no longer shrinking, but expanding with my breath. I'd been their echo, molded by their needs, but that never had torn through the script, leaving me raw and real. My gaze drifted to the window, where Portland's lights pulsed through the mist, a city alive beyond their grasp. Relief unfurled, slow and sure, a warmth threading through the chill of defiance. I'd crossed a threshold, one they couldn't pull me back from, and the strength I'd buried stirred awake, sharp as the rain's edge. But as the glow flickered outside, a question snagged at me. What would they hurl my way next? Christmas Eve draped my Portland loft in a quiet veil, the rain thinning to a gentle mist that beaded on the windows like scattered pearls. I'd steeled myself for a hollow ache after cutting ties with Mom, Claire, and Dad, expecting solitude to press down as the city glittered with festive lights beyond my walls. Yet as I brewed a pot of coffee, its earthy scent curling through the air, a curious lightness took hold, soft as the steam rising from the mug I clutched. I settled into my armchair, its worn leather creaking under me, and switched on an old movie, its grainy shadows flickering across the room. My notebook rested on my knees, the pen digging into the page as I scrawled a question that burned behind my eyes. Why had I always crumbled under their will? The ink bled into memories. Thanksgivings I'd sweated through alone, their voices loud with praise I never earned, my spine bent to their convenience. I stopped, the pen trembling, my pulse quickening as I faced the answer. I'd traded my voice for their approval, fearing the void if I didn't. My phone buzzed, a sudden jolt against the stillness, and Sophie's name flared on the screen, my 13-year-old niece piercing the fog I'd sunk into. Her text hit like a spark. "I wanted you on the trip, Sadie. Nana's unfair to you." My breath caught, a rush of heat flooding my chest, her simple truth slicing through years of my own denial. She'd seen their weight on me, this fierce girl with eyes too old for her age, and it unraveled me in a way I hadn't expected. I typed back, my fingers unsteady, vowing a day just for us when she returned, a bond I'd forge beyond their grasp. That vow cracked something open, a clarity unfurling like petals after frost. I could love them on my terms, not theirs. The movie's hum faded as I stood and drifted to the balcony doors. I stepped outside, the mist brushing my skin with a cool, fleeting touch, the air sharp with the tang of evergreen. Portland stretched out below, a mosaic of amber and silver shimmering through the haze, its vastness a mirror to the space I felt growing inside. My lungs expanded, each breath a release, as if I'd slipped free of a harness I'd worn too long. The coffee's warmth lingered in my hands, a tether to this moment, and my loft glowed behind me, a haven I'd shaped, not a shield I'd hid behind. I'd been their anchor, dragged by their tides, but never had set me adrift, and Sophie's words had steadied my course. I gripped the railing, its chill seeping into my palms, the city's hum blending with my own. Loneliness stayed away, replaced by a quiet expanse that lifted me beyond their reach. The mist faded, the night crisp and boundless, and I stood there, grounded yet soaring, knowing I'd started to redraw the lines of family. Still, as the lights pulsed below, a shadow flickered in my mind. What storm would they brew when they came back? Christmas morning unfurled over my Portland loft, the sky a muted canvas streaked with tendrils of fog that softened the world beyond my windows. I woke with an ember of resolve still glowing from the night before, determined to wrest this day from the shadow of my family's fracture. The kettle whistled as I steeped a pot of tea, its floral steam weaving through the air, a quiet defiance against the solitude I'd once dreaded. I stood at the stove, coaxing eggs into a golden scramble, their sizzle a hymn to my small reclaiming, when a knock rippled through the stillness, firm yet gentle. I opened the door to Mrs. Ellis, my neighbor, her silver hair a halo in the dim hall, a tin of scones nestled in her steady grip. "Saw your lights last night," she said, her voice a low ember of kindness. "No family today?" Her question pierced the armor I'd worn thin, and soon we sat at my table, mugs of tea warming our hands as I poured out the tale. Mom's icy command, Claire's careless laugh, Dad's stern pull, it spilled from me, rough and unguarded, my throat tightening around never. Mrs. Ellis met my gaze, her eyes alight with a tempered strength. "Never isn't cruel, it's courage," she said, her words falling like leaves on still water, deliberate and true. She'd broken free herself, she confessed, a widow who'd shed her own family's yoke, and I felt a quiet bridge form between us, fragile but firm. She invited me to dinner, a gathering of holiday loners in her home, and I agreed, drawn by a pull I couldn't name. That evening, I crossed her threshold, the air rich with time and the hum of voices, a tapestry of lives unfolding. I met Owen by the window, his frame lean, his eyes shadowed with a weariness I knew too well, his voice gravelly as he shared his fracture. His ex had swept their daughter, Sophie's age, onto a cruise, leaving him to carve his own no. Our stories tangled, a knot of shared refusal, his resolve a mirror to mine, sparking a bond I hadn't sought. Laughter swelled around us, a woman spinning a yarn of a charred roast, a man plucking guitar strings that danced through the room like fireflies. I settled into a chair, Mrs. Ellis pressing a plate of warm bread into my hands, her smile a steady flame, Owen lingering close, his presence a quiet anchor. The flavors burst on my tongue, sharp and vivid, as I watched these strangers knit into something more, their voices a balm to the silence I'd feared. My family's absence faded here, their grip loosened by this unexpected chorus, a gathering that didn't demand but welcomed. I'd forged my loft as a bulwark, a solitary stand, but this room wove a different thread, a haven where I wasn't just enduring but belonging. The fog pressed thicker outside, a shroud against the glass, yet the glow of lamplight bathed us in amber, a fragile warmth I leaned into. My chest eased, a smile breaking free, tentative and real, the first unshackled joy in days. This Christmas defied the script I'd braced for, a gift rising from the embers of never. But as the notes faded and the fog held its secrets, a whisper crept in. How long could this piece withstand their return? Days after Christmas, a taut stillness gripped my Portland loft, the fog beyond the windows swirling in fitful spirals, flecked with the faint shimmer of snowflakes teasing the air. The echo of Mrs. Ellis's dinner hummed in my bones, a fragile harmony against the discord I sensed brewing, my family's return from their Bahamas cruise a shadow creeping closer. My phone shattered the quiet that afternoon, Mom's name a jagged flare on the screen, her voice piercing through when I answered, coiled tight as a spring about to snap. "You deserted us," she snarled, her words dripping acid, spinning a tale of a trip turned to ashes, Claire's kids a tempest she tethered to my refusal. I leaned against the counter, its edges cool beneath my fingers, and let her fury ripple past, my heartbeat a steady drum beneath her storm. Her accusations carved me as the traitor, the selfish anchor that sank them. But I stood firm, unswayed. "I didn't desert anyone," I said, my voice a calm thread woven through her chaos. "I chose me." She barked a laugh, brittle and cutting, then hissed, "You'll regret this, Sadie." Before the line clicked off, her parting shot a splinter lodged in the silence. I lowered the phone, its weight a feather against the iron settling in my spine, and turned to the window, the fog a restless curtain over Portland's blurred glow. Strength coursed through me, not a blaze but a tempered blade, honed by the days I'd reclaimed. Then a faint chime broke the hush, Sophie's name lighting the screen, my 13-year-old niece stealing through their ranks with a whisper. "I told Nana no too," she confided, her voice a quicksilver thread, recounting how Mom had pressed her to fill my shoes, a puppet to mend their fray. "I wouldn't do it," she said, her defiance a lantern swinging in the gloom, and my throat tightened, a surge of awe and kinship swelling within me. She'd defied them, this bold flame of a girl, her stand a twin to mine, and I grinned, her courage a beacon across the distance. I vowed a day for us when they returned, a rebellion stitched from our shared resolve, and hung up, the loft stillness alive with her echo. I drifted to my desk, the floor creaking softly, and pulled out a notepad, my pen tracing a vision, a renegade Christmas of sledding down frosted slopes and cider warming our hands, a rite beyond their grasp. The fog pulsed outside, laced with snow's first breath, cloaking the city in a veil that couldn't dim my purpose. My loft thrummed with a rhythm I'd set, a space no longer a refuge but a forge, shaping what came next. Mom's threat hadn't pierced me, Sophie's fire had steeled me, and this plan rose like a signal flare, a testament to the ground I'd claimed. I pressed my forehead to the glass, the chill seeping through, my breath a fleeting bloom against the pane, and watched the skyline flicker through the haze. Their return loomed, a tide I couldn't halt, but as the fog swallowed the last threads of light, I stood ready, not to weather their wrath, but to meet it with a storm of my own making. Weeks later, my Portland loft buzzed with a vitality I'd never known, the air sharp with the tang of snowflakes drifting past the windows, too sparse yet for the hills but dusting the sills like a sprinkle of sugar. I'd called Sophie, Liam, and Mia to join me, their arrival a gust of life that swept through my door, fulfilling the vow I'd made in our quiet rebellion. Sophie strode in at 13, her grin a knowing arc, Liam at 6 a spark tugging at my arm with boundless zeal, Mia at 9 a whirl of wonder, her fingers brushing the edges of my shelves. Cider simmered on the stove, its cinnamon scent threading through the room, a ribbon of warmth against the frost tracing the panes. I pressed mugs into their hands, steam rising in playful wisps, and watched delight unfold, Liam sloshing a drop onto the floor, Mia chuckling as she dabbed it clean, Sophie etching our day onto paper with deft, bold lines. I crouched beside them, guiding Liam's small fingers through a shoelace knot, steadying Mia's grip as she poured her own cider, marveling at Sophie's focus, her pencil a soft hum against the page. This was our domain, unshackled from their rigid frame, a mosaic woven of laughter and choice, the loft aglow with a freedom I'd summoned. Then a knock sounded, firm and familiar, and Owen stepped through, his daughter, 13 like Sophie, trailing with a glint in her eye that matched my niece's fire. The kids merged in a tumble of shouts and play, a vibrant knot, while Owen met my look, his smile a steady bridge spanning the space. He'd returned, unasked, a fragment of that Christmas night reborn, and my world flexed, opening to a shape I hadn't foreseen. We leaned against the counter, cider mugs warming our palms, his voice a gentle undertow beneath the children's din as he shared his quiet triumphs. The loft resonated with their clamor, a chorus I'd never rehearsed, yet it rang true, each sound a note of defiance against the family I'd shed. Time blurred, the daylight fading to a pearlescent sheen beyond the frosted glass, and I lifted Sophie's sketch, 4 stick figures marked hours, in her sloping script. My heart swelled, a truth anchoring deep, not a burden, but a sail catching wind, carrying me onward. This wasn't a fleeting moment, but a ritual taking root, forged from the never I'd dared, and the spark Sophie had fanned. The kids sprawled across the rug, spent and happy, their mugs drained, while Owen lingered, his nearness a hint of paths uncharted. My loft, once a lone outpost, had bloomed into a sanctuary, its walls cradling a family I'd built, not borrowed. I stood at the window, snowflakes twirling thicker now, a gossamer veil over the city's silhouette, and saw us reflected, a cluster of stars against the dusk. This was mine to tend, a bond born of will and warmth, and as the snow gathered, I wondered how tall this tree might grow. Months wove through my Portland life like a thread through fabric, the snow of that first renegade Christmas softening into spring's delicate hues beyond my loft's windows, only to circle back as winter reclaimed the city with a fresh mantle of white. My family bent with the seasons, their hold slackening, Claire's apology a hushed offering over coffee one bright morning, her eyes shadowed with a guilt I hadn't chased, Mom's murmurs fading to a faint rustle I could sweep away with a turn of my shoulder. I crossed their thresholds now on my own rhythm, a guest who flowed in and out like a stream carving its own bed, no longer their echo, but a voice sharpened by my own will, unbroken. Owen drifted closer, his steadiness a deep undertone beneath my days, our talks stretching into evenings of shared glances and unguarded laughs, a flame flickering toward a warmth we hadn't yet named. The renegade Christmas took hold, rising each winter as a touchstone, summoning Sophie, Liam, and Mia to my door, their chatter a vibrant weave through the loft, cider mugs ringing as snow cloaked the streets in a crystalline hush, Owen's daughter joining them, her spark a twin to Sophie's at 13. I'd trace their growth, Sophie's sketches blooming with intricate lines, Liam's knots firm with quiet triumph, Mia's pores steady with a grace I'd fostered, their roots twining with mine in a soil free of their old demands. Portland unfurled beyond my balcony, its skyline a bold etching softened by the wheel of time, and I'd step out each winter as snow swirled anew, the flakes drifting like sparks from a fire I'd lit long ago. That first never had been my strike, a chisel against their stone, sculpting a life I'd claimed with every breath. The loft, once a quiet shell, sang now with the resonance of us, its walls a mural of tender defiance and hard-won joys. I leaned into the railing one twilight, the air stinging with winter's edge, my breath curling in fleeting ribbons against the deepening dusk. The city blazed below, a galaxy of lights cradling my form, vast and unyielding, an echo of the expanse I'd forged within. "Never isn't the end," I whispered, the words a creed etched into the frost. "It's the spark that fuels what's next." Snow dusted my hair, a fleeting coronet I wore with pride, and I lifted my gaze to the boundless sky, certain this life, this family, this strength would ripple outward, a tale still burning bright in every flake that fell. Looking back, I see never as the spark that carved my path, lifting me from a life dimmed by their demands to one I forged with my own will. It showed me strength isn't just standing alone, but choosing my circle. Sophie's bold echo igniting mine, Owen's steady warmth a shore I hadn't sought, my loft a living proof of family rooted in trust, not chains. I learned a single no can bloom into a life untamed, a lesson etched in every breath I take. What about you? What word has ever shattered your silence, set your soul ablaze with a new dawn? I'd love to hear your sparks, your turning points, so weave them into my story however you can. Until our next tale kindles anew, may your never be your torch, and I'll return with fresh fires to share.